It's time to get started with the hero section. Now, previously in the previous module, in the intermediate module, we could just build out the layout and then think about the interactions at the end to kind of like make things a little bit more flashy. But when we're doing complex advanced builds like the one that we're doing right now, we actually have to think about the interactions right at the beginning because they are going to inform how we are going to structure things. So we're going to structure them in a way that we can animate them. So let's try to figure out in this design, what do we need to happen? So we have this background video that's running here. And we know that as we're scrolling, we have this kind of like mock-up here. As we are scrolling, the next sections actually come up on top of it and they're going to hide it. So the background is fixed and the actual content of the website scrolls on top of it. And I can actually show you here in the complete build that I already have. You can see that the next sections are actually covering up. So the video background is fixed, and then we have the actual content scrolling on top of it. The other thing that we can see here is that we have the logo, and the logo is aligned to the bottom of the screen. Now we have to remember that different people have different screen sizes, and as you can see, it's always sticking to the right, to the bottom of the screen. So somehow we need to dynamically calculate where the logo needs to be at the beginning and then always make it scroll to the right position at the top as we're scrolling. So let's think about what's actually going on here. So I have here kind of like my structuring plan for the website, and here's what we basically have. So if this side here is the body, we need to have the fixed hero background fixed at the top. So this is just like probably a section that's fixed to the top of the body. And then we need to have, let's think about this in terms of layers, right? And we're using Z-index to actually determine the layer. So this is probably going to be Z-index number 1. The thing at the bottom of the stack of layers is the fixed background. And then we're going to have probably a wrapper for all of the content that's going to be on top of it. So that can be maybe Z-index number 2. And that's a wrapper for all of the content that's going to scroll on top of it, right? So it's actually because the background is fixed and it's not taking up space, then probably the scrolling content is going to be on top of it. So that means that for us to be able to see the fixed hero at the background, we'll either need to push this whole thing down a little bit, or we'll need to create kind of like an empty section with nothing on top of it so that we can see what's in the background, and then the following sections are going to have a kind of like a background color that's going to come on top of this video background. So that's the first 2 layers, and then the next layer that we have, which we can probably call the Z-index number 3, is the navigation. Now, the navigation is also fixed, and you can see that the top navigation is fixed here as well. However, if I'm going to make it, let's go back here. If I'm going to make it fixed at the top, I've mentioned that I want the logo here to always align to the bottom of the screen initially, right? So that probably means that we need to create the wrapper for the nav that's going to take up 100% of viewport height. So that means that whatever the user's screen size is, we're going to take up 100%. And then I can create this. These are, let's imagine that these are the letters of the logo. I'll be able to align them to the bottom if we're setting this logo to absolute positioning, and then we can align them to the bottom of the navigation wrapper. It can be a little bit of a head spin right now, just trying to explain what I'm going to do. But for me, it's very helpful to try to figure out the structure before I'm going down to build it. Let's head back into Webflow and start to actually build this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create my video background. So I'm going to add a section here. Let's add a section, and I'm going to call this section fixed hero background. Okay, and what do we want? We want it to take up almost the whole screen, right? Not 100% of the screen. You can see here the video is kind of like, and it's going to get to in the middle kind of the letters of the logo, and the logo is all the way down. So let's say that this video background has the height of 85 viewport height. something like this. I think this is the right approach. So we've got that. Now we want to add a video background. Now we never used this component, but Webflow actually has a component here that's called background video, and I can drop that in here. And now I can go ahead and upload a video. So let's go ahead and do this from our assets panel. I have here a video. Now, when you're using stuff like video background, usually it's going to be a big file. So originally I've made an edit of like 20 seconds of free clips so that we can use, and it was 48 megabyte. I've then went ahead and compressed it so that the file is not that big, and it got to 11 megabytes, which is okay. It's still kind of like a big file. So in this case, we will probably need a preloader so that the file is loading before we're actually seeing the video, because otherwise the video might not load when people just immediately get into the website. So I'm going to click open, and now it's going to start uploading it. Now, one thing that you want to note is that never mind the fact that I compressed the video, Webflow, because they are trying to make the file as small as possible, they're also going to compress the video. So sometimes, of course, they're trying to optimize speed load, and that's nice, but sometimes that's actually going to compress your video too much and maybe ruin the quality of your video. Later on, when we're going to create our video library, I'm going to show you a different solution of hosting the videos elsewhere and embedding them so that you can maintain a higher quality of video if you want. But for most part, for things like the video background that we're using right now, Webflow's native component works pretty well. And while it's working, you can see it's transcoding, which basically means it's like compressing it even further. I can set the parameters here. Loop video, it's what I want. Autoplay video is what I want. Include play pause button. I do not want this. So I'm going to toggle this off. And let's go ahead and continue. One thing that I can see already is that this video is not filling up the whole hero section that we have here. So let's add a class to this. Let's call this background video, and just make sure that this is 100% height. Okay, so now it's going to take up the whole screen, and it might take a minute or two before we actually start seeing the video in here, but in the meanwhile, we can continue. Oh, actually it's here. It's not playing, but if I'm going to hit preview right now, you can see that the video is already playing, so we're good. Okay, so we've got the video background. Now, it's not fixed yet, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and add another section here, let's actually add, and I'm going to add a div, and I'm going to call this page wrapper. Page wrapper, because as you remember, I need to have something to wrap up all the content so that it can come up on top of it. So this scrolling content, or page wrapper as I call it, is going to hold all of the different sections in this homepage. So I've got this page wrapper, and just so that we can see or set this to be fixed, let's add a few sections into it. So I'm going to add a section into it. The first one, I'm going to call it an empty section. Empty section. Because you remember that first I want to see what's on top of it. So there's nothing in it besides the fact that it's 100% viewport height. So that's it. Now you can see that right now it's after this background, because we did not set the fixed background to be fixed yet. We'll do this in a second. So we have an empty section, and let's actually copy that, duplicate the empty section so that we've got two sections. I'm going to add another section, and this one I'm going to call this temp section. This is just temporary for me to be able to see that stuff actually comes up on top of the video background. So the temp section, let's make sure that it's 100% viewport height, and let's give it a background color just so that I can see something scrolling, and you'll see in a second why this is important. So right now we've got three sections. We've got the video background, then we've got an empty section, and then we've got this temp section, which is green. Now, let's go back to the fixed hero background, and let's go ahead and set its position to fixed, and let's make sure that the Z index is 1. Okay, so, and also make it fill. Yep, so that we can see it, and it takes up the whole thing. Okay, so now this section is fixed. How do we know that it's fixed? Now I'm going to start scrolling, and you can see that initially there is nothing on top of it, And then as I'm scrolling, actually this page wrapper is not coming on top of it. It's actually going behind it. So let's set the page wrapper to relative so that we have access to the Z index and give this a Z index of 2. Let's try to scroll right now. Okay. So now you can see that the page wrapper has an empty section, which we're scrolling first, and then the temp section comes up and fills the screen. Okay? And that's great. Of course, we'll replace the temp section with the actual section later on, but the first empty section, we actually need it because we want to see the background before we're starting to scroll. So we've got the first thing. We've got almost 2/3 of this setup, right? We've got the hero fixed. We've got the scrolling content set up. And now we want to organize this navigation area. So let's think about this. This needs to have wrapper to the navigation that's going to take up the whole screen, and needs to have the actual navigation inside of it. So let's add another div here. Div, and let's call that, I'm going to put this at the top just for organizational purposes. I'm going to call this nav wrapper. And this nav wrapper, I'm also going to set it up as, sorry, not fit, as position fixed. And I want this to be on top of the 3 of them, right? So we've got Z index number 1, number 2. Let's set this Z index to number 3. Okay, and inside of this wrapper, I'm going to add the div that's going to hold the content. So let's call this nav content. And nav content, let's see what's inside of this nav content. Let's start, before we're getting into the responsive typography, let's start off with what we have here. So basically we have here a logo on the left side and then 3 elements on the right side. And then it has a black background, and we know that because when we'll scroll down, it will be black on top of everything else. So let's go ahead and create that. First, I want to think about how am I going to lay this out. I can basically create a flex box that aligns things or to the left and right so that we have one group and then a second group. We can try that. Let's go ahead and try that. So inside of the nav content, we have 3 elements. We have the logo part, and this typography is going to scale down into the logo. So on the left side, we have logo, and then on the right side, we can call this nav content, maybe. So let's go ahead and add here 2 divs inside. I'm going to add div and then another div, so I'll copy paste that. The first div, I'm going to call this nav logo, and the second one I'm going to call nav content. And this nav, I can't call this nav content because we already have nav content. So instead, I'll call this nav content wrapper. So let's rename this nav content wrapper, and then I can call this nav content just to make sure that we know what's going on. Nav content wrapper needs to have a black background. So let's give this a black background. Also needs to have probably some padding from all sides. Okay, so let's give it a little bit of padding from all sides. We can't see it yet because there's no content inside. And also we know that we want to set it up as flexbox that is justifying space between, so that one element is on the left and one element is on the right. So we've got the structure. Let's start with this nav logo. Let's bring in the icon. So I'm actually going to zoom in here and select this, copy this as an SVG. I'm going to come here into the nav logo and paste this. And let's see that we have it. Okay, but for some reason, I'm not seeing the nav at all. And I think I know why. We set this to be fixed, but we didn't tell it where to align itself into, so we're not seeing it. I'm going to set it to align to the top. Yep, and now we can definitely see it. And I can see that I've added the logo in here. So this looks okay for now. On this side, on the nav content, we need to have 2 buttons, right? We need to have button number 1, a white button, and actually a green button that looks a little bit different because it has a different icon to it. And then we have a text. So let's go ahead and add these elements here. I can go ahead for my components, and I have button white. So I can go ahead and add that one, and I can change the text to login. So we did not create properties for this component. So let's go ahead and do that right now. We want the link to be editable. So link, every instance of this component can change the link, and also the text. So select the text, and the text is going to be text or button text. So now that I've set these, I can go ahead into the instance and I can change this to login. We don't have the page yet, but we'll set this up later. We also wanted, what else did we wanted? We wanted this discover. So let's add another button. So let's add a main button here right next to it. And now we've got a weird spacing because we have three elements that we're trying to space between. We basically, oh, that's actually because it's not inside of nav content. But now they're also stacked. Now we have two elements, the nav logo on the left and the nav content on the right. Now I actually want to wrap these two buttons together in a button group, because as you can see, we actually, even on the right side of our elements, we've got two elements. We've got the buttons together, and then we've got a little bit of space between the text that we're about to have here. So let's actually wrap them together, and you might remember that in our style guide, we wrap them in a div block that we called button group. So let's do button group. We already have that. So now if they're both in this wrapper, they're going to be stacked, flex horizontally with a little bit of a gap between them. So let's see how that looks. That looks great. That's exactly what I wanted. Maybe this gap is a little bit too big. 15, that looks good. Now, for this white button, we created two properties that we can edit, right? We have the text to edit, and we have the link to edit. This one in particular, we actually want to also change the icon. Now, if we were using an image for the icon, then we can add another property for changing the icon. In this case, because we've used an embed, we can't actually set the code of the embed as something that we can change for each one of them. So I think just because this is the only button that we have on the website with a different kind of icon, I'm just going to detach this from the component, because this is just a one thing. I don't have to build this for scalability right now. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to select this icon that we have here, double clicking until I get to the actual group, and I'm going to copy that as an SVG. I'm going to come here, actually just double click this and replace the code and see if that works. Yep, that works. So I've got two buttons inside of a button group, and I can now add the text not inside of the button group, but inside of the nav content. So let's add here a text block. We've got that, okay, also not in the right place, but we'll fix that in a second. Let's copy the paste here, copy the text, put that here. So how do we need to arrange the things inside of nav content? Well, usually the solution is to turn that into a flex box, and now they need to be horizontally. I want the text to be on the left side, so I'll put it first. Okay, so there's few things here to arrange. Number one, I want like a big space between these elements, but I also want to make sure that this text block is not as big as it can be. You see, here it's limited to 373 pixels wide. So let's go ahead and do this. For this text element, let's call this nav text. First, let's ensure that it's not bigger than 370. So in the size and the max width, I'm going to set to 370 pixels. That looks pretty good. Now I only want the space between them. Now the space between them, you can see that they're together, maybe they're taking up almost half the screen. And because I want this to be responsive, I guess the size here of this space would change or need to be decreased. So let's start with having this nav content maybe takes up 50%. No, not 50. 50%, not 50 pixels. That looks pretty good. And then I can also justify here for space between. So note what we have. We have two elements in the nav that are spaced between, right side and the left side. And then in the right side, we have the element set to 50% of the screen and then two groups within it, left side and right side. And now it's also responsive because if I'm changing the size of the screen, the nav content is always 50% of the screen. So it's going to scale down as the screen scales. And I think this looks, for now, it's pretty good. It's probably going to be problematic in small sizes, and we'll have to figure this out. Maybe then let me do this 60%. Maybe we have a little bit more space, or 55%. Okay, I think this is good. We'll make sure that it's responsive later on. I just wanted to change this to discover. Okay, so we've got basically the navigation, the content of the nav bar in place, and it's also fixed. So you can see while I'm scrolling, it's fixed at the top of the website, which is great. Now what we have left to do is bring in these letters and make sure that they are aligned at the bottom of the screen here. So to do that, first of all, we have to make sure that the nav wrapper itself takes up the whole screen. So let's see if it has a height. It doesn't have a height. So I want to make sure that it is 100% viewport height. Okay, now the wrapper takes up the whole screen. And now let's think, where am I going to place the letters? I think I'm going to add them inside of nav logo because essentially they are part of the logo. So I'm going to add them in here. And to begin with, they're going to be big and then they're going to scale down. So let's add another div in here and let's call this inside of the nav logo. And I'm going to call this logo letters wrapper. And this element needs to be absolute. So we can align, and it's to the nav wrapper. And you can see because we've set the nav wrapper, the nav wrapper is fixed. So it's the parent element. It's actually two parents, right? There's the nav logo and nav content wrapper, but because these are static, both of them are static, as you can see here, the logo wrapper is relative to the next one that is not static. So either relative or fixed. In this case, it's the nav wrapper, which is exactly what I want, because now I can align it to the bottom and it's going to be in here. We can't see it because there's nothing in it. It's just a div at this point. So let's think about how to bring in the letters. Because there's going to be a masking animation here, and let me reload this so you can see it. You can see that the letters are being revealed. So number one, that means that the letters are separate. I'm going to have to bring in an image separate for each one of the letters. It's not just like one logo. And I'm going to have to wrap each one of them in a div so that we can use it as a mask, so that when we are doing the animation, it's going to, basically mask them. So let's see how many letters do we have in the logo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so let's into the logo wrapper. I'm going to add a div. And let me call this div block. I'm going to call this logo letter mask. Okay, and copy that 9 times, was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, you can see that they're stacking one on top of the other, which is not what I want. I want them to be stacked one next to each other. So let's take the logo letter wrapper, turn that one into a flex box that is aligning them horizontally. Okay, that's great. Now let's go ahead and bring in the letters. Now, previously, to bring in vector elements, we've been using the copy as SVG. However, when we're copying SVG and bringing them as embeds, they're not super responsive and they're going to lose their shape as things are scaling. So in this case, it's actually best to go ahead and export each one of the letters as an SVG and upload them as image assets. Now I've done that, so let's bring in the assets here. Assets, home, logo letters. All right, so I've exported the letters here, and you can see, get access to this folder below this video. Let's go ahead and upload all of these assets. Let's bring that here and upload all of them here. And now let's bring in each one of these into its mask. So let's start with number one. First one goes in here. S becomes super, super huge, but I'm not worried about that right now. After that, sport, SP. So number two is P. 3 is O, sport. You can see as we're bringing them, because it's a flex box, the flex is trying to put all of them in one line because we didn't set the flex to wrap. Sport, R, T. All right. And then link. Set that here. I. N. And K. Sorry. And K. Okay. So let's see what we have. We've got a lot of letter masks, and inside each of them we have an image, and then the wrapper sets them in a Flexbox and makes sure that they are fitting in here. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? The logo letter wrapper will be later be able to animate it. So right now it's 100% of the width, but if I'm going to animate it later on, you can see that I can scale it this way. So this is really, really great. I'm going to just set this initially as 100%. And the nav wrapper that takes up the whole screen, I'll also be animating the height. And when I do that, we can see that the logo will go up because the logo is always aligning to the bottom of the nav wrapper, right? So logo wrapper, absolute at the bottom, okay? So that's how it works. That's how it's always aligning to the bottom of the nav wrapper, which is currently for the whole screen. And that's why if we change the screen size, it's always aligning to it. So let's see what we've got so far. We've got a video background. We've got the logo aligning here. We've got the navigation at the top. We can scroll and we can see that the next sections comes on top of it. Now all we have to do is to set up the animations and interactions for both the sports link. No, before I do that, there's something here that we need to fix. And this is in the details, but this is really important. I don't know if you pay attention to this, but look at the spacing between the letters. They're not as neatly packed as these. You see here we've got equal spacing. This is called the spacing between letters is called kerning, okay? And this is really important in logos to have very equal spacing between the letter. It looks wonderful. And here, because these are, you know, the inside of rectangulars, they're actually spaced. Here the space is big, but because this has a different angle, here the space is smaller, here the space is way smaller. So they're not spaced equally, and it just doesn't look very good. So I'm going to fix this. Let's go into the logo mask, and I'm going to add a class called fix kerning. Fix kerning. And I'm going to just reduce or create negative, basically negative margin to bring in the letter next to it. And I'm going to do this not with pixels because we're going to scale this logo. So let's think about doing this in percentage base. Let's do minus 1%. That's actually a little bit too big. So minus 1.8%. Okay, I think this is good. Let's see what other letters need this combo class of fixing the kerning. I think this one needs it. So let's do fix kerning. And you can see that automatically suggests this as a combo class. This looks good. O also needs it. Fix kerning. The R doesn't need it. The T does need it. Fix kerning. L doesn't need it. I needs it. N needs it. Yep. Okay. Now I think it looks better. Okay, now it looks really great. Okay, now we're ready to move into no. Every time I'm looking at this, I'm like, I don't think this looks great yet. And one thing that I note is that we've got equal padding here, top, bottom, right, but here this is not centered and this is not centered either. So let's go to the Flux. Let's see what arranges them. The Flux content wrapper, and let's just make sure that they are aligned to the center. So this fixed the logo, but it didn't fix this because this is actually arranged in the nav content. Let's also align this to the center. Okay, now we've got it. Now this is centered. This is centered. Now things look good. All right, in the next video, we'll create the animation, the scroll animation to bring the Sportlink logo into place, and also create the loading animation because, as I've said, this video is long. We're going to need some kind of a loading intro for people to see while the video in the background loads. So let's do that in the next video.